and hopefully bring benefit to you and your health. I'm going to be quick because between Asr and Maghrib, especially Yom al-Jumu'ah, such a special period, especially for making dua. Duas are mustajab, so I'll be as quick as I can. So apologies if I'm going fast. What I want to say before I start is I want to give you hope. What I'm about to say is going to be very, very radical. It's going to be a culture shock, and pretty much everybody here is not going to like me by the time I finish after what I'm going to say. But I want to give you hope because, alhamdulillah, over the past 12 months, what's happened in my practice with my patients, alhamdulillah, 76% of our new diabetics have had reversal of their diabetes without any medication. Have you ever heard of that? You never hear of that, don't you? No medication. And every single patient that came to see me, I'd give them a choice. Do you want medication or do you want lifestyle changes? Every single one said, don't put me on any medication. And alhamdulillah, 76% have had complete reversal of their diet. In other words, their bloods, their sugar levels are not in the diabetic range, and it all happened within 3 months. So I want to give you hope that if some of you are thinking that, gosh, it's too far, too gone now, I can't reverse things, I can't change things, inshallah you can. It takes 3 days for your body to get into gear when you make changes. You notice that in Ramadan. The first 2-3 days is a bit of a struggle, and then by now it's like a walk in the park, and it's day 9, right? By 3 weeks, your body really starts seeing some massive changes, and by 3 months, you reach where you want to be. I had another patient, and I call him my prize patient. He weighed 152 kilograms. 152 kilograms. Again, same conversation. Do you want to go on pills or not? And he said, don't put me on anything, please. So I put him on a very specific type of lifestyle plan. And mashallah, in 10 weeks, he lost 20 kilograms. Do you ever hear of that? Tawfiq is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no, nothing else. And his cholesterol went from 7.8 to 3.6 in 10 weeks. So I want to give you hope that there's so much possibility here with things. Okay, next slide. Couple of things though before we start is that Ramadan, and this is really important to understand this, but this is the starting point. I know we're up to day 9, but we've still got 21 days left, inshallah. But you have to start with this, that Ramadan is not a festival. Understand that, okay? And don't make it into a festival where it's just big iftars, big events, and so forth. It's an ibadah, it's a month of worship and nothing else. It's a perfect time to calibrate your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and have a more meaningful relationship with your religion and your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's also a perfect time to calibrate your health. One of the traditions that's reached us from the Prophet ﷺ, where he said to the effect, Sumu tasihhu, fast and you watch your health improve. You will be in your element, you'll have vitality, you'll have energy, you'll have an abundance of energy actually if you fast. So it's a perfect time to calibrate your health as well because you're in a state of discipline. Now, when we talk about discipline, when I say the word discipline, what sort of notions do you have when I mention the word discipline? What comes to your mind? Positive or negative? Some say positive, any negatives? Usually in our culture, when we say discipline, it's a negative connotation. But let me tell you something. I don't know anybody who's achieved success in any sphere of their life without self-discipline. Whether it's with their career, whether it's with their finances, whether it's with their relationships, whether it's with their marriage, whether it's with their health, whether it's with their body, whatever, whether it's with their religion. Unless you have an enormous degree of self-discipline, you won't achieve your goal. Now, Ramadan gets you into that zone, doesn't it? Of having that self-discipline because you become more aware. Automatically, you develop this God consciousness, which one of the shuyukh translates, taqwa translated into God consciousness. So it's all about self-discipline. So this is message number 1 I want you to remember, that it's all about self-discipline. You are based on what your habits are, and your habits are based on whether you're disciplined or not. You understand that? So remember message number 1, discipline. Okay, next slide. So let's give you a history lesson. In the 1900s, what was the top cause of death? Anybody know? 1900s, it was actually infectious diseases. So people dying because of infections. Then, alhamdulillah, Allah gave insan tawfiq to make antibiotics, antivirals, vaccines, save billions of lives. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Okay, what's the biggest cause of death in currently? Heart attack. The commonest cause of death. You know, when COVID happened, between the first year of COVID, between the ages of 5 and 34, the commonest cause of death was suicide. Allah save us. So the commonest cause of death for adults in this country, and by far it is right at the top for Asians, is having a heart attack. About 27% of deaths is caused by that. Now, having a heart attack doesn't just happen like that. There's stages to how this happens. And we'll talk about that. Next slide. Now, if you look now in 2023, yes or yes, isn't there more disposable wealth than ever before? We have more billionaires on the planet than we've ever had, and millionaires on the planet than we've ever had before. If you look compared to 1900s, you couldn't turn a tap on and have clean water and drink it in this country. That was just non-existent. Right now, you and I could sit here and swipe right, and by the time it's Maghrib, we can have a chai wala's delivered right here. Okay, chai from India, right, to England, right, swiping right. Yes or yes? Is our quality of life, has it never been as good as it's ever been before? Yes or yes? It's true, isn't it, right? Okay, question though, why are we so sick? Why are we so ill? You understand? Why are we so ill? And if you look at, I don't want, because I'll depress you, if you look at cancer rates, diabetes rates, cardiovascular, it's skyrocketing and it's out of control. So the question is, why does this happen? And this is what we're going to explore a bit more. Next slide. Now I want to ask you something. If this was your car in the morning, this is Dr. Campbell Murdoch. Sometimes I'm influenced by a lot with my medical work. He talks about this. If this was your car in the morning, how would you feel getting up and going to work in that thing there? Just shout out how you'd feel. Depressed? How else? Sluggish? Huh? Yeah, mashallah. That's a man with a true heart, alhamdulillah. He's not ruined by the external baqwas that we're faced with. But you wouldn't feel good, would you? You'd drag yourself out of bed thinking, I got to drive that thing in the morning. Okay, next slide. Now, how would you feel if you had one of these babies? Now, all your faces have lit up now. May Allah give you one each, inshallah, with afiyah and salah. You said, Ameen so loud. How would you feel if you had that in the morning to drive? You'd be like, yeah, baby, I'm getting up no matter what time it is. You'd feel good, wouldn't you? You'd have an abundance of energy. You wouldn't feel anything. You'd be like, I'm going in my, in my car. Well, next slide. This is you. This is your engine. Do you understand? Your body is either that clamped out car or that Bugatti. That's what you are on the inside. Next slide. So how do you get to being, a Ferrari or a Bugatti or Aston Martin or whatever you fancy? There are 6 things that you need and you can't do without. And this is what experts say who deal with lifestyle medicine. What they say is right at the top, you have to have a nutritious diet. There's no ifs or buts. You have to have a nutritious diet. It's a very famous phrase. You can't outrun a bad diet. Run all you want. Run like Forrest Gump. But you cannot outrun a bad diet. So you have to have a nutritious, which is right at the top, which is what we're going to talk about today. You have to be physically active. Khalas. You have to do at least 150 minutes of physical activity a week, which equates to 22 minutes and 30 seconds a day. If you don't have that, if you just got to do 11 minutes in the morning, 11 minutes in the evening. If you don't have that, wake up 10 minutes earlier, go to sleep 10 minutes after. Or I'll give you something even better. Get off your phones. 5 years of your life go. By the time you're 60, you lose 5 years of your life on that phone of yours. 5 years is gone. And on average, an adult spends after work 8 hours on their phone, doom scrolling, looking at nothing or nonsense. A child spends 6.5 hours a day after school on their phones, looking at nonsense. So your life is just going on these things. So that, you've got to be physically active. You have to manage your emotions, which is the mental health side. You're a human being. You have emotions. That's normal. That's okay. You're allowed to have emotions. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But what's important is that it's important to regulate and calibrate your emotions, because if you don't feel good psychologically, you will never feel good physically. Isn't that true? If you ask anybody who suffers from a mental health problem, they will not feel good physically because they feel bad psychologically. And it's really, really important. The Prophet was with the Sahaba and he asked them, who's the strongest from amongst you? And they were all men sat there at that time. Who's the strongest? And the Sahaba, because when men were men, they said the one who can floor the other. And the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no, it's the one who can control his anger. What the Prophet, what ulama say, what the Prophet was trying to say to a man was that a strong person is one who can control his emotions. Now, one of the hardest emotions to control is anger. And that's why if you look at books of suluk and how to purify your heart, in terms of emotions, anger is right at the top. If you can control anger, you can probably control any emotion that you're faced with. And if you can control anger, it's a deep sign of faith. If you can't control anger, your faith, there's a problem with it. And Imam Ghazali talks about this in a lot more detail in a lot of his books, like Ihya or Arba'in fi Usul ad-Din. Look at it if you're interested. You have to have a decent sleeping pattern. Sleep, my favorite pastime. You have to have at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep over a 24-hour period. It doesn't matter how you do that, but you need to get that in. The obvious one is avoiding substance misuse. Like, I tell my patients, if you're already down and you don't feel good physically, psychologically, mentally, and you're drinking, you're doing drugs, you're vaping, and you're smoking, you're not going to feel good. So you have to eliminate that. And vaping is a trend now, especially with young people. 1/3 of vaping products, they're not regulated. You don't actually know what's in them. And then the sixth thing is my little masala that I've put in. The sixth thing is that you have to have spiritual growth. If you are not growing spiritually and constantly, rising in your rank with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and building those spiritual muscle, then you will not be in your element. There'll be something missing. You'll feel like that there's something just not there. So it's really important to incorporate all these 6 things. Okay, next slide. And one of the other doctors who I'm really influenced by with the work that I'm doing, Dr. David Unwin, he writes in one of the books that are we eating ourselves into illness? Are we eating ourselves into illness? It's a really important question. But the good news is, because we're giving hope, is that you can eat yourself out of illness as well. Okay, next slide. So somewhere along the line, somebody decided that we need to eat 3 meals a day. Where that came from, I don't know. But somebody said we need to. But I should have said this at the beginning. This isn't for children. Children actually do need to have a decent amount because they need to grow. This is mainly for adults. Some bits are for children, which I'll come to, but this is mainly for adults. So somebody said you need to eat 3 meals a day. But if you look at the graph carefully, what happens is like 60% of our food is processed food. A lot of our foods have got sugar pumped in them. Okay, hands up. Who's had organic brown flakes? No one. It's disgusting. It really is. It's not nice. So the stuff that we get is a lot of it has got sugar that's pumped into it. Okay, whether we like it or not, just to make it taste nice, but also to get you in. Sugar is 10 times more addictive than cocaine. And so if you're wondering why you're still picking at things when you're not hungry, it's because there's probably an addiction there. But what happens is when we eat, generally, pretty much everything has got carbohydrate that we eat. It's 3 ingredients mainly in food: protein, carbohydrate, which is sugars, and fats. When we eat foods, the hormone that's supposed to get your glucose levels down is called insulin. You've all heard of that? Very famous one. Okay, so what happens when you eat? Glucose levels go up. Insulin levels go up as well. So after food's digested, it releases glucose. So glucose levels go up, insulin levels go up. Now, what happens when insulin levels go up is that the glucose levels come down. Insulin is there to get your glucose into cells where it needs it for energy: muscle, brain, organs, and so forth. Now, what happens is if we have had a diet that's rich in carbohydrate, we're accustomed to having a diet that's rich in carbohydrate, or we're just simply eating a lot. So remember, every time you put food in your mouth, the insulin goes up. And this takes decades. Your insulin just says, you know what, forget you, bro. I'm not doing this anymore. You've made me work so hard for 20, 30 years. I'm not doing this anymore. So your insulin doesn't work as well as it should or could. So glucose levels don't go down. When glucose levels are high, it'll kill you. So the brain sends a signal to your pancreas to send more insulin. Okay, more insulin. This is where the problem lies. When you have high levels of insulin in your body, it does 2 things. Number one, it converts mainly 2 things. It converts sugar, if it's not burnt off, or carbohydrates into fats. And then it goes in places where you don't like it to go. That's number one. Number two, it is the hunger hormone. The real hunger hormone is called ghrelin. But insulin also makes you feel very, very hungry. And so when your sugar levels are when your insulin levels are high and you're hungry, what do? You eat and you snack. And you see where the cycle goes, right? Okay, next slide. So what happens is you eat food. A lot of our foods have got carbohydrate in them. So insulin levels go up. Insulin eventually doesn't work as well as it should or could. All the sugar that's in your bloodstream gets converted to fats. Because it's not being used as energy, you feel tired and you've got that high level of insulin that's making you hungry. You go and eat again and again and again and again. You following that so far? Okay, next slide. This is where the problem is. Then this whole process is called insulin resistance. This is what happens before you end up with diabetes. High levels of insulin, and this is message number 2 that you need to remember. First one was discipline. Second one's insulin. High levels of insulin, or if insulin doesn't work as well as it should or could, is a direct cause to all of these diseases. Heart disease, migraine, muscle wasting, strokes, high blood pressure, obviously type 2 diabetes, even dementia. PCOS for our sisters. Obesity is the obvious one. In other words, you've got to work on carbohydrates. Next slide. This is where you're not going to like me. I'm really sorry. Cocoa Pops. I know you like your Cocoa Pops, lads. But if you look, after you eat Cocoa Pops and it's digested and broken down, the equivalent amount of glucose that's in your bloodstream is 7 teaspoons of sugar. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Would you put 7 teaspoons of sugar in your food, on your food? Yes or no? You wouldn't, would you? So this is after it's broken down. Do you know when it says serving size 30 grams? Do you know how big of a bowl 30 grams is? Anybody? It's not our huge bowl. Do you know the variety boxes that you get? You know the small ones? That's what we're talking about. So usually our bowls are double that, aren't they? So you're looking at 14 teaspoons equivalent that you're eating. Look at cornflakes. Okay, next slide. Sorry guys, this is where you're not going to like me. Look at rice. And I'm talking not like one of our mountain plates, like we've never seen food before. I'm talking a flat 150 gram serving, a one-off serving, or a normal serving. After you eat rice and it's broken down and digested and glucose is released, it's the equivalent to 10 teaspoons of sugar. I've done it here, haven't I? You know, the first one I did was here, mashallah. And Sheikh, you know, mashallah, he must make so much dua for me. He has a lot of pyar for me, Sheikh, himself. And, you know, he did give me a lot of dua to do this work. And alhamdulillah, three and a half years and still going and not stopping. Alhamdulillah. Allah give him barakah. So I did this in Glasgow, the long one that I did here when I first did it in 2020. And this brother said, my mum said, who's diabetic, said, I'd rather die than give up rice. I'd rather die for some. It's really hard. That's why I say it's a radical change for some of us, right? Look at aloo, potato. After you eat it, digest it, and it's broken down and glucose is released into the bloodstream, 9 teaspoons of sugar. It's a starchy vegetable. Starch is carbohydrate. Look right at the bottom. Look at egg. 0. We'll come to why you know this is so important. Okay, next slide. So now, did you get all that preamble? You understood that, yeah? So everybody then goes, okay. Patients say to me, okay. Friends say to me, what do I eat? Because the road where the burger is looks so good, and the road where the green stuff is does not look good. Okay, next slide. Before you go to which road you take, you have to ask yourself some hard questions. If you want to generate change within yourself, you have to have challenge. If you want to generate change, and you know what? Those of you obviously who come for Taraweeh and listen to Quran, the Quran's full of challenge, constantly asking us questions to get us to think, raise the bar with your intellect. Ask yourself certain questions. Why do you eat? Serious question. One of my friends, he's a mufti from down south. MashaAllah, I think he's mid-40s now. He's in good shape. And one thing he was saying to me was, he said, I don't eat because of lazzat. I eat because of function. Kitna pyara. That's just the way it should be, not for lazzat. Why do you eat? Do you eat because you just really enjoy your food? Are you addicted? Serious question. Are you addicted to foods? The food addiction is an undiagnosed concept. Are you bored? My patients say this. You know, I just eat because I'm bored. I've got nothing to do. You put something on the TV and just snack away. Are you comfort eating because you're stressed? We do that, don't we? There's a bit of pressure. There's a bit of turmoil. What do we go for? Quick finger foods. Who's in control? You? Are you in control? Or is food in control? You've got to ask yourself these hard questions. Is it your nafs? Remember, Ramadan's about discipline. Serious questions. Do you live to eat or do you eat to live? They're two different things. Okay, so ask yourself these questions. That's the next slide. Then when you get to that, then this is your blueprint for life, not just for Ramadan. Remember, Ramadan, the whole purpose of Ramadan is to get us into gear to reach taqwa. And that taqwa is supposed to last us for those 11 months. And then the next Ramadan, you up the bar a little bit and gain more taqwa. And that should last you for another. And that's what your life is about until you reach that, the state of becoming an arif. Allah grant us that, inshallah. So the same thing with your food. This is lifelong now. It isn't just a Ramadan crash diet. What I recommend is a protein-rich diet, and I'll break that down for you. Complex carbohydrates, and I'll break that down for you. Healthy fats, and drink water. The Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam only drank two things most, if not all of his life: water, Zamzam, and milk. And there's a reason why he did that, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And you've got to commit to saying to yourself, no more junk. No more sugary foods or processed foods or fizzy drinks and stuff like that. No more refined carbs, unless it's a celebration like Eid or someone's getting married or Hifz completion or whatever. But only reserve it for those moments. Okay, that's your blueprint. Next slide. Okay, so what you go for when you go for protein, if you can either, if you're a meat eater or if you prefer to not eat meat, that's fine. But they're the lists that you go for. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of, because when he gets his point, a lot of patients and friends and family, they say, what do I eat though? Okay, so I'll give you an example. This morning, what did I have for Sahri? For Sahri, I had omelette and smoked salmon with soft cheese. 0 sugar, 0 carbs. Okay, that was my Sahri, and a big mug of water. That was my Sahri. And that was at 4 o'clock in the morning, and mashallah, it's 7:30, and by Allah, I'm not hungry. It's tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but that's also the barakah that Allah's put in protein. What happens when you eat protein? Energy is released over a longer period. Okay, that's why it's beneficial for you. Or the other day, I had my wife made some chicken burgers, and I had that with guacamole for Sahri and a ginger tea. It was fine. Yes, I do have cereal, but I have porridge oats. It's got a little bit of protein in, but it's also got what's called complex carbohydrates. It's got sugar in it, but it's released over a longer period, so it doesn't spike your insulin. And then the same for iftar. Iftar, you want to go for more protein-rich foods. Okay, you understand that? Okay, next slide. When it comes to carbohydrates, basically you avoid simple carbs. Avoid white bread, white pasta, white rice. Avoid cakes, cookies, sweets. I know all the good stuff, isn't it? You're all going to hate me now. You're going to kick me out of this masjid. Just avoid them completely. The sugars go too high. Insulin levels go too high. If you don't burn it off, it gets converted to fats in an instant, within 20 minutes, actually. That's why it's really important to avoid all these simple carbs and go for brown, go for wholemeal. Go for starch, go for vegetables, go for salad, go for fruit, go for beans, go for dal. We love dal, don't we, Gujaratis, right? Go for dal. It's fine. Quinoa is a grain. Go for oats. If some people say, well, okay, if you're telling me not to have rice, what do I have in my curry? Have broccoli rice or cauliflower rice. You can buy that. It's really tasty. Or just get fine chopped vegetables and just pretend that's rice. Well, what do I have instead of bread? Okay, have wholemeal pita bread, but have half. Don't have a whole one. Just have half. And then what you do, you just dump loads of salad into your salad and then have it with a spoon. Or get a green leafy vegetable and use that as your roti. Because it's just psychological. You know the roti thing that we do? It's just psychological because you don't feel like you're having the salad without a roti. But they're quick wins for you. And instead of aloo, have cauliflower. Okay, that's what you go for. Next slide. And that's it. Your Sahri and Iftar is protein-rich, complex carbs, but small amount of carbs, and healthy fats. So cook in olive oil, have avocado, have fish, especially salmon, mackerel, non-tinned tuna. Healthy fats, walnut, almond, hazelnut, but in small portions because of the cholesterol effect. But that will keep you going for the whole day. Okay, and drink tons of water. Okay, that's your blueprint. Pretty simple, isn't it? Yeah, it's more than doable. And what you'll find is when you let go of rice, roti, and aloo, you won't feel as bloated. You will not feel tired. You won't. After you eat, you have that crash. You get a bit sleepy. That won't happen because your sugars aren't crashing. Okay. Now, if you're finding this too hard, where you think, hold on, I've been having rice, roti, and aloo my whole life, and you're telling me to stop. If you are not like I'm all or nothing, that's my personality. So I can do that. But if you're not that person where you think I can't do that, then what I suggest you do is, okay, fine, Don't have it more than twice a week. Don't have rice more than twice a week. Don't have roti or bread or anything equivalent more than twice a week. Don't have aloo more than twice a week. And never have it together. Never have it together. Okay, that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, have it in small portions. And rule number 3, after you do have carbs, run. Okay, burn it off. Okay, next slide. Key message is go low carb. There's more evidence medically that you will lose more weight by going on a low carb diet than a low fat diet any day of the week. If you have I don't mean no carbs, I mean low carbs. If you have low carb diet, within 10 days you lose 1 kilogram. If you have a no processed food diet, within 10 days you lose 2 kilograms. Okay, next slide. But remember the rule. You need to exercise, but you won't outrun a bad diet. Understand? Run all you want, but you will not burn that fat off, okay, or lose weight. Next slide. Now, I've just scratched the surface. Maybe I'll come back into it in more detail if you're interested. But essentially what I say one of my biggest messages when I give these reminders is that you don't need me to tell you all this. All you need to do is just turn your attention to the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and switch off your phones and read. Read his life. Read how he was in terms of his diet and his physique. Next slide. Very famous hadith. I'm sure you've heard it. ما ملأ ابن آدم وعاء شر من بطنه. That the son of Adam cannot fill a vessel worse than his stomach. بحسب ابن آدم أكلات. And the famous narration is لقيمات يقمن الصلب. It's enough for the son of Adam to have a few morsels. Now linguistically, our Hazrat Rahimahullah, Nawwar Allahu maqadahu, when he explained this hadith to us, he said that luqaymat linguistically, you have luqma, which is morsel. Luqayma is small morsel. Luqaymat linguistically is 3 to 9 small morsels. And that's why he said Umar radiallahu anhu used to only have 9 morsels of food when he ate. He only used to have 9. So Hazrat Rahimullah said that this is small morsels. Yuqimna sulba, to hold your back straight. And if you can't do that, فَإِن كَانَ لَا مَحَلَّ فَثُلُثُ لِطَعَامٍ, then 1/3 for food, وَثُلُثُ لِلشَّرَابِهِ وَثُلُثُ لِنَفْسِهِ, 1/3 for liquid and 1/3 for air. Very famous hadith. Try it from today. Like essentially, I'm just going to see how much my stomach is filling, and when it's like a little bit full, I'm going to give some space to water. It's a little bit full, I'm going to stop. And watch how much barakah you'll have in your eating. Now look, if you wanted to study medicine 1,000 years ago, you'd have to go to Baghdad to study this. And one of the Christian scholars came to Baghdad to study medicine, and he read this hadith, and he said, مَا سَمِعْتُ كَلَامًا أَعْجَبَ عَنْ هَذَا عَنْ قِلَّةِ الطَّعَامِ. I've not heard anything more astounding than how to reduce your food intake than this hadith of the Rasul. This was a Christian scholar. And then when I started this work, I was talking to my colleagues at work about some of the stuff I'm doing with the massages and the BME groups and so forth. And he said, your prophet talks about health. I said, of course. I said, one of them said to me, she said, tell me a hadith or a narration or tradition. I said, well, I told her this one. And she said, if people followed this, if the whole world followed this, there'd be no health problems. Now look, 2 people, not of our faith, completely different generations from one span of generation to another, who recognize the genius of the Prophet ﷺ. We should as well. Incorporate his sunnah. One of the things the Prophet ﷺ did, when he sat like, look at our brother who's in the sorry, I'm pointing you out. That's how he sat when he ate, ﷺ. And the other position was in the at-tahiyyat position or the squatting position. Those 3 positions are the only 3 positions where your entire GI tract is straight. You know when you're full, basically. Okay, if you're sat on the floor slumped, your belly's just going to go as you eat. You won't be able to tell whether you're full or not. Whereas if you sit in the prophetic manner, you can tell when you're full. He ate with these 2 fingers and this thumb. It's impossible to overeat when you eat like this. Agreed? You understand? It's impossible. And eat together. And when you eat, don't have the TV on and don't have your phones on. Honest. You'll be more mindful when you eat. You'll be more conscious about how much, because when you're distracted by, say, your phone while you're eating or TV, you're just munching away without thinking about, am I full? Do I need to eat? Etc. Whereas if you're away from your phones and you're more engaged with actually what you're doing, you're probably going to eat less. But one of the other reasons is that the Prophet ﷺ did say, one man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, inna na'kul wa la nashba', that we eat and we don't feel full. And the Prophet ﷺ said to the effect, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَأْكُلُونَ مُتَفَرِّقِينَ. Maybe you guys are eating and you're separated. اجتمعوا على طعامكم. Why don't you gather together when you eat? وَاذْكُرُوا اسْمَ اللَّهِ, make mention of Allah. and then Allah will put blessings in your food. These are all prophetic traditions, because if you don't feel full, it could be that you're not eating in the prophetic manner. There's more which I'm sure you're aware of. Next slide. Next one. I didn't say it. And look at this. This is really interesting. Aisha radiallahu anha, one of our greatest scholars, one of the top 5 scholars of this religion, she said after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, one of the first musibah that happened after the Prophet ﷺ left this world was that people used to eat to their full. That was the first musibah after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. Then she said, "Lamma shabi'at butunahum saminat," and then when they actually started filling their bellies, they became fat. That was her statement. Then said, when they're shabi'at butunahum saminat abdanhum, they became fat. And then said, "Fatasa'abat qulubuhum," then their hearts became hard. Wa jama'at shahawatuhum, and then the desires just went wild. Now, if you look at it, if anybody wants to enter the state of spiritual state with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, go backwards. If our desires are out of control, if we go backwards, it could be because our hearts are hardened. Okay, what's the cause? According to one of our greatest scholars, Aisha radiallahu anha, is overeating, filling the stomachs. Think about that. Next slide. Now, I'm just scratching the surface. If you want more information, honestly, just turn your phones off and get reading. Read the life of the Prophet. Read the Shama'il. Read anything about the Prophet, especially how he ate, what his physical what he was like in terms of physical, like his whole life, his chest and his stomach was straight. He was a physically fit individual until the end of his life. Read the lives of the Sahaba and how they ate. Ibn Umar radiallahu anh used to say that I didn't eat to my full for 12 years. And they asked him why. He said, because I grew up with people like Yani Sahaba, Yani his father. I grew up with people who had no interest in food. It just wasn't a thing for them. Like nowadays, it's like, what are we going to eat in the morning? What are we going to eat in the evening? When are we going to go out to eat? It's a massive, it's too much of a Aish culture. Next slide. And the real reason is because, and I'll end here, is that Ramadan is all about breaking your nafs. It's about being aware of what your nafs is calling to, and learning to say no to things that are going to distract you or take you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is at the essence of Ramadan. Al-kayyisu man dana nafsa. The intelligent one is not the doctor, not the dentist, not the lawyer, not the engineer, not the entrepreneur, billionaire. The intelligent one is the one who's able to subdue his soul. Man dana nafsa, break his nafs. Wa amila lima ba'd al-maut, and work for what comes after death. Why is that important? When you think about just the journey of our soul, before we came here, we were in alam al-arwah, wherever that was. Then we came here. How long are you on this planet for? Max. Anybody know? Nobody lives after the age of 120 nowadays. You know that, don't you? Nobody does that. You've got a 1 in a million chance to live up to 100 years. Okay? That's your soul's time here. Some people, they die after birth. Some people 10, 18, 25, 40. One of my friends was telling me that one of his friends, who's the same age as me, 40, suddenly passed away 2 months ago in his sleep. A month ago, sorry. And he was a medic. He was a doctor, fellow doctor. No cause identified. Do you understand? Then after you die, where does your soul go? It's in the grave, right? How long are you in the grave for? If we just take an example of the Prophet ﷺ, he's been resting for 1400 years. That's a long time, isn't it? And then how long's akhirah? There's no end. There's no moat when you end up in paradise or hell, right? Okay, why am I telling you all this? The shortest window of the soul's journey is on this earth. The shortest period your soul has in terms of its journey is on this earth. So then which I question myself, why am I giving this world everything? And why am I giving my soul nothing? When I know that actually this is just a temporary abode, it's like a hotel. You understand that? And the biggest trip up is the concept of aish, just wanting to live. You understand? Biggest trip up. And the thing is that, and one thing I learned from Hazrat Rahimullah is that if you don't read the life of the Prophet ﷺ and look at how he was and how he chose to be hungry and how he didn't have any longing for food or aish in general, whether it's with your house, your furniture, your clothes, and so forth. So if you don't use that as your benchmark, it does so much nuqsan to your faith. He said you can't put words to it. وَالْعَاجِزُ مَنْ أَتْبَى نَفْسَهُ هَوَاهُ وَتَمَنَّعَ عَلَى اللَّهِ. The foolish one, and some ulama have translated this as a stupid one, is the one who just follows his desires wherever he wants, or his caprice, and then has wishful thinking with Allah. I'm just going to do what I want, and then I'll raise my hands on Jumu'ah and make dua to Allah, and I'll get what. That's not going to happen. And if you get it in this world, you ain't going to get it in the next world. Next slide. We'll finish here. Sufyan ibn Uyayna, one of our greatest scholars of hadith, and 91 years old. He did Hajj 70 times. And on the 7th, every year when he used to go, he used to ask Allah, bring me back. And on the 70th time, he said, I was too shy to ask Allah to bring me back. And he passed away in Rajab the year following in Mecca. He said, the intelligent one is not the one who knows what's right and what's wrong. Because there's plenty of us who know that, right? We know what's right, we know what's wrong. He said, the intelligent one is the one who can see good and follow it. And the one who's not intelligent, and also he can see wrong and stay away from it. That's the definition of intelligent, not doctor, not dentist, not lawyer, not engineer, not anything like that. That's the intelligent one. And we'll stop there, inshallah. No time for questions because Maria's in 3 minutes. I know I've offended a lot of you, but if I had, I'm sorry. Sometimes, a doctor has to give you an injection, don't they? Yeah, but it's for your own good. But I promise you, try and work through this. Inshallah, your health will improve, your weight will reduce, your blood pressure will go down. Like with all my patients, blood pressure will go down, cholesterol will go down, your weight you'll feel alive and you're feeling your element. Inshallah, we'll stop there. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. Wa sallallahu.